r/AskReddit asks. Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Had a patient come in for a fall who now couldn't move their legs at all. Did a bunch of tests, didn't find anything. The patient was not at all fazed by suddenly being paralyzed, which was the first red flag. Didn't really believe anything was wrong, but the patient was still not moving their legs. My options are to admit for a huge workup or get them to walk. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative, you can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed and walks out without a word. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. That's the best part about most of these stories, when they make up some form of fake machine so that the patient stops faking. Cracks me up every time. Physical therapist here. Working mom comes into the clinic with her infant in a stroller. She's limping like she's got a nail in her foot. Wincing in pain and tears in her eyes. She's crying during her visit with the PT. None of us think she's faking it. She limped out of the clinic. I glanced out of the window and saw this woman bounding down the sidewalk. Hips swaying, full stride, going places. We were all fools. Sorta along the same idea. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy come in to try and get a refill on some pain meds that had no refill. After pleading that his ear really hurt, we told him again we couldn't refill it. One of the other employees saw his step into a side hallway and take a pencil and jam it forcefully into his ear repeatedly, drawing blood. He calmly left and went to the ER. He came back a few hours later with a prescription for pain meds. My brother was an EMT for 2 years and he told me this: people will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego, because the hospital is in Oswego, by faking seizures. Sometimes when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew that the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures but not peeing himself." Apparently the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. We had a family calling for a Medicab, a cab paid for by income-based insurance, from somewhere out in the sticks to our ER in a college town, every few weeks or so. The mom would be seen for some ailment or the other. And the rest of the family would go to Walmart, go to the mall, do all their in-town errands. She was basically faking an emergency illness every few weeks so they wouldn't have to pay for a cab to get their shopping done. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking, tried to keep eyes rolled back into his head. The whole 9 yards. He said he is a famous YouTube rapper that is now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard of him before and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course his eyes were back to normal and focused. I am amazed he didn't ask for a discount, or to have a free checkup for some exposure. A patient claimed to have all kinds of illnesses and would cough every minute or so. Have you tried coughing when you don't need to? It's like a normal cough, but you take the subwoofer away. Now imagine that, but 10 times more fake. Haha, I cough as a nervous tic. It's always been something I've been embarrassed of, but I figured it was pretty inconspicuous. I remember when I finally got the courage to tell my friends I have a nervous tic, and I'll never forget they said, "Is it the coughing?" We figured there's no way you could have a cough for 2 years straight. Also, they do sound pretty fake. Sometimes my friends will tease me by doing an equally fake sounding cough right after I do. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attending one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hello wave. She started to throw her arm up to but caught herself halfway through, then threw her hand back into her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. I would never have expected pretending to be blind to be such a commonly faked issue, but reading this thread has changed my mind on that issue. One time my roommate, who is an ICU nurse, came to see one of my indoor soccer games. During the game a player on the other team went down hurt and starting screaming in pain and swearing and rolling around while holding his ankle before he was eventually helped off the field. He then limped over to where the fans sat and watched the rest of the game brooding in silence before he left early. After the game my roommate told me he was going to go over and see if there was anything he could do to help, until he saw that the guy was limping on the wrong leg. I once saw a patient who had been faking paralysis of the legs for years. Used a wheelchair, never walked, etc. Old records showed extensive imaging, neurology consults, and other tests that proved the patient had full function of all extremities. Family/friends were just going along with it. Not sure if it was really conversion disorder or if the patient had some secondary gain issue. That's so baffling. I'm a part-time wheelchair user and I don't know why anyone would choose to make the world more inaccessible to themselves. Guy came to ER, I was a nurse at the time, for stomachache. When asking him about history he randomly mentions a fight with his girlfriend where she left in a tizzy and he fell asleep on the couch. 20 minutes later when we see the CT, he has a satellite cable remote wrapped in a condom lodged in his rectum. I suppose he intended to frame her. Didn't get to hear the conversation he had with the doctor. I was curious how he was going to explain why she was nice enough to wrap it in the condom. Why would they start with a CT scan? I had a patient when I worked in a ICU that was sedated and on a vent. A family member showed up out of nowhere and was staying day and night. I got pretty suspicious of them because they were clearly lying about knowing this person. Just talked to the fake family member about how it must have been sad since they just celebrated their birthday a week or so before getting ill. This person said it was a wonderful party and such, to which I replied their birthday hadn't occurred yet and wouldn't for months. Turned out when security came it was a homeless person who snuck in and found a room with a sedated patient and decided to make it a place to stay. Needless to say security to enter the ICU was absolute shit. Ophthalmology technician. People pretend to be blind all the time. Go to check their eye pressure with the TON open, a device you poke them directly into the eye with, and they go, "What the fuck is that thing?" When I worked family practice admin, the clinic I was working in was A, in the country and B, had been passed along through various doctors over the years, starting from about 1960. Holy God, the old tonometer they had looked like something from the Middle Ages and the general opinion of the clinic was that it doesn't get used anymore. It was like a museum, the previous doc never got rid of anything, so you had drawers filled with metal aniscopes and things. ER nurse. Bringing a patient back to a room who said he had kidney stones. I had him stop at the bathroom and get a urine sample. Dude comes out with the specimen cup that literally has a piece of concrete in it. Looked him in the eye expecting some sort of joke. He was serious. I threw it away and walked his dumb ass back to the waiting room to contemplate his stupidity. Obligatory. Not a doctor, I'm a nurse. We had a guy who had to come in every 3 months to get a medical certificate to say he couldn't work at his retail job due to severe disabling back pain. He was receiving large amounts of insurance money for this condition. After the doctor had done his usual examination and questions and signed it off, the guy asks the doctor to check his shoulder, which doc does, and asks how he injured it. Guy says playing rugby for a competitive team. Really, says doc? How long have you been playing for them? Guy has been playing and training the whole time. Doc puts this info on insurance form. Doc loses his shit in staff room laughing. Next week the patient loses his shit in reception because his insurance has been cancelled. Not a doctor, but I was in the ER one night and there was a seeking drug addict who literally only acted in pain when there was staff around. You ever see those videos where the little kid is fine and then they spot a parent and then bawl, then immediately stop and be fine when the parent is out of view? Exactly like that. Sat fine, no movements or wincing or noises, then wailing when a nurse was in the same vicinity, then back to fine when they left. A few weeks ago, I had a vulvar biopsy. I was petrified of this procedure, and I didn't know how to ask the doctor if I'll be given pain meds, because of people like this. There is no way to even frame the question without sounding like a drug seeker. I ended up not needing anything at all, but still. Figure it's a legit question, but you can't ask it. Years ago I had a patient who had been rear-ended in an auto accident a few weeks before I saw her. She had a history of lupus. She was decked out in the usual crippled paraphernalia, crutches, neck brace, elbow braces, wrist braces, knee braces, and could barely walk. I saw her a couple of times and she showed no improvement. One Saturday I was on call but had to take a back streets route to the hospital because of an event taking place on the main thoroughfare. I apparently drove through her neighborhood, because, wonders behold, there she was wearing old lady spandex power walking down the sidewalk, holding weights in both hands. I did not call out to her. Next week, she was back in clinic, with her I'm crippled get-up on again. A few weeks later I got the subpoena for the deposition, and it all became clear. Not a doctor but nurse. I once read a specialist's consultation report and at the end of the report the actual diagnosis given was fictitious ailment. Oh dang. Is a fictitious ailment something that can be noted in their medical records? Prisoner came in with signs and symptoms of a big stroke. At that time the protocol was to get a non-contrast head CT to rule out a bleed and then give PA, a powerful clot-busting drug that's only worth the risk if the benefit is to mitigate a major stroke. So that's what happened. Later in the course he got a little carried away and started embellishing his story with symptoms that didn't make sense with his stroke diagnosis, and that's how we figured out he was faking it just to get some time away from jail. I'm a surgery resident. When I was on my trauma rotation we had a patient come in after an MVC, with question that maybe the patient had seized and that had caused the accident. So he's in the trauma bay, and starts shaking. The trauma nurse goes, "Oh, this isn't a real seizure." And the patient stops shaking, sits up, turns to the nurse, and yells, "You don't know a fucking thing about me." My mom was an emergency room nurse. Years ago they brought a prisoner from the local pen in who seemed to be unconscious. The guards were suspicious that he was faking it. They checked his vitals and everything seemed to be okay. The attending doctor tried poking him in the foot with something pointy, nothing. Then he got an idea, they took a rubber hose and inserted it in the back of his throat as if they were intubating him. That did the trick. He sat up very quickly coughing and gagging. Edit, yes, sternum rub, got it.